Is this the dagger?
Illegal substitution, too many men on the field, Saskatchewan.
Gizmo has a block and the sideline. He has not stepped out. He may go all the way. He needs one block and he'll do it easily.
Promise Mess I wouldn't do this.
McDavid stops up. What a move. Shoots. Scores!
Hey everybody, welcome to The Outsiders, powered by the MacIntosh Group at RE/MAX RiverCity. I'm Bryn Griffiths, he is Robin Brownlee, and joining us is the better looking of the two from the new podcast, Got Your Back, Jason Strudwick. Struddy, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys this morning?
Doing great, thank you. Hang on a second. Okay, before we get going, let's talk about this podcast that you and Ryan Rashog from TSN are doing. How did this come about, man?
Well, it seems like it's a popular thing to do, and Shagar contacted me a little while ago, and I was interested. I love doing the show with Greg's. This is just a different platform. Sharing something with Shagar, so it's fun, to get on there and kind of talk a little bit about the Oilers, and then kind of talk about the Got Your Back idea segment, which I love. Is a little bit of positivity. I think we could all use a little bit of that. So yeah, it's we've got a couple under our belt, and so far, so good.
You know what, Jason, the thing that strikes me is you seem to have always been drawn, at least since your playing days ended, up to the microphone. I mean, you've done dinner TV, you've done late night stuff at TSN, you've done Gregor now for several years. Yeah, I mean, you got rid of that very average host he had for many years and taken that spot. What's the attraction for you?
Well, even when I was playing, I enjoyed, I like talking about the game. I talk with my teammates. The reporters weren't too interested in talking to me as a 6 or 7 defenseman, but every now and then they'd run out of things from the big guys. So they'd come to me, but I enjoy it. And I think that the talking about the sports is one thing, but entertaining is something I love to do. I think I'm a pretty fun guy. At times I can be funny. And you try to entertain people. I think that's really what I'm good at. So, everything I've done, you talked about the nighttime show. I had no idea what I was doing, and they let me do it, and I figured it out a bit. Then I go to TV, and I knew even less what was going on. I didn't know what a rundown was. I didn't know anything. And they're like, it's like you never went to school. I'm like, you're right. I didn't. I have no idea what I'm doing. So they trained me up, and I think there was improvement there. Then even things like Battle of the Blades, I did. Very uncomfortable, like stepping out of my comfort zone, I think is something I asked my kids to do. And I think that I try to do it. My wife and I both do it. So that all leads us to here. And now I'm very comfortable talking, with anyone for a podcast or a radio interview or speaking to different groups, kids, adults, whatever. I think that, after this has been over 10 years now, I've improved slightly.
You've come a long way, man. I'm very proud of you. Hey, here's one thing though. So through your playing career, which is over 600 games, which is fantastic, but you played in, you played in some sizable markets. You played in some hockey feverish markets. So while everybody's running to the big guys to get their quotes and their interviews, were you kind of studying a little bit of what was going on, thinking, I wonder what it's like to be doing that? Or did it never even occur to you till you were done?
Well, I did think, I often wondered why guys wouldn't go to talk to the guys that didn't play as much. Because I think they let's look at this team, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, they're getting bombarded daily. Now it's changed a bit with COVID, but if you go talk to the Chris Russell or you go talk to the Brad Malone, they're happy to talk because no one's talking to them. And you're like, oh, it's like, it's kind of like you're the ugly guy at the party and a nice young lady comes and talks to you. You can't believe it.
Yeah.
And so you're actually getting someone that wants to talk to you. So, I'm not saying you're going to squeeze more juice out of them, but they might be more open and willing to talk because they haven't talked daily. And so I always wondered that why guys, when it comes to kind of that lower third of the lineup more often.
But did you see them, the media, as being potentially one of you later? Did you ever think that at any point? Because some guys, we had Ray Ferraro on, always wondered what it would be like. And then he said he got into it. He couldn't believe how tough it was. Never saw that coming. But some of these guys have always said that might be an interesting gig for me later. I don't want to coach or that kind of stuff or be a general manager. I might want to do that, but you never had that at all when you were playing and looking at the other guys?
I think so. I think it was between that and coaching. I mean, I would have loved to have been a coach. I had some opportunities, but with my young family, it wasn't a choice because it's either family or coaching. There's very little time for both.
Yeah.
And I made that choice right away. And not that I just backed my way into the media, but I said, okay, this is what I'm going to set my mind on because of the time. And so it was kind of both, I would say, when I was playing, but I definitely had an eye towards coaching. I mean, I coach my kids now and I love it. It's the best part of my day. Have that hour of practice. I run it like we're running for the Stanley Cup, right? I just love that challenge. And it's a lot of fun trying to make these kids better.
Well, and you also have a hockey school that you run, Jason. So you are doing some coaching. Is that as close to the National Hockey League or pro hockey as you're going to get as a coach? Are you happy doing that with the broadcasting now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I retired, I had a number of offers to go coach in the AHL as assistant coach, right? That's kind of the way you work your way up, right? Like AHL, maybe down to the Western League, or not down, but to the Western League as a head coach and move back up. And so I could see it. And I've had friends who've done it. I could see the path in front of me. And it just didn't jive with what I wanted to be with my kids. I wanted to be with them. So I'm very satisfied. Like I do have the D-men camp. I coach my own kids, and just seeing kids understand something and unlocking a part of their game, it's really satisfying. And, with the D-men camp, I'll see the kids for a week, but I've had some that have been coming for years, and, seeing them come back saying, this is what I did this year. This is what I love it. Like I think that hockey, I know that for a long time, I was very focused on the NHL. They realize there's a massive pyramid underneath of all different ages and levels of players. And, I love working with the best, and I work with some that are just kind of finding their way in the game. And I love it all. It's just it's a great game, and it's a great community to be a part of. And I'm lucky to have a pretty decent role here in Edmonton in that hockey community.
Well, you happily got this great break doing radio. Now you're doing some TV stuff as well. That means you've got to comb your hair. You've got to, you got to worry about what you're wearing, as opposed to in radio. You don't have to worry about that. How are you finding the TV stuff now?
Well, when I was doing the nighttime show on TSN, I got a chance to do a few like That's Hockey's on TSN, and I knew I wasn't ready. I sat down there. I had no idea what was going on. People are talking in my ear. Other people are telling me what to do. I'm looking here, looking there, no idea. So that's why I went to dinner TV. I had I didn't know a lot about politics. I don't know a lot about social issues, or at that time I wasn't completely versed. It's picked up a lot since then, but I went there, and I took it as going to university for 2 years. We did we had to do 14 hours of TV, what live to tape or live programming every week, and I would be the host. So 14 hours a week, I was cranking out, talking about all these different topics, looking ahead, looking behind, hosting ladies panels, hosting like all this different stuff. And I grew so much as a broadcaster, and my comfort level with people talking to me while I'm talking to you and maybe trying to argue with someone, like it was a huge improvement. And so then when I went back, to TSN, I got a chance to do a few more things like that. And you're talking about doing the Oilers broadcast. I'm so much more prepared. And I think that, I took this transition to the media much like I did as a hockey player. I knew I wasn't the best player, and I knew I wasn't the best broadcaster, but I had to work my way up and put the time in. And I think there's been an evolution of steps and growth, and listening to people who, give me feedback. And so now I feel like I'm much further along than I was 5 or 6 years ago. It's not a finished product, but definitely improved.
It's interesting, Bryn. You and I were chatting, but I used to give Struddy a hard time. At night, I'd either text him or I'd tweet about, gee, I've never heard so-and-so's name pronounced that way before.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, it's part of the steps. I mean, I was brutal. I mean, a print guy. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I can write a sentence, but I'm not a radio guy. I listened to some clips and went, oh my God, that's awful. Yeah. What are you thinking? Who have you talked to? Who is Gregor in there somehow? Because you do his show regularly, but you've always got help along the way of people who might say, try this, maybe don't do that. What's it been for you?
Yeah, and I think that's, it's not one person that's been a mentor. Like Gregor's definitely been a huge help for so many. He got me in the business. He was a huge help, and he'll give me tips. But to be honest with you, Brownlee, a lot of times I watch other people and see what I like about them. So I'll watch like Kevin BX. I think he's, if not the best, one of the best analysts on TV. But what I like about him is he's himself. He's not trying to be someone else, and I really respect that about him. He has great insight. His insight, I always think, man, I love the way he said that. I love the way he phrased it, or, kind of put it together so we could all understand it. But he's himself. And I think that's what I try to be the most, just my truest form. And I know I butchers names, and I know I butcher sayings, and honestly, that's who I am. If we all went for beers, I'd do the same thing. So I try to be the most authentic version of myself. And that way I don't have to try to be somebody else who I'm not. I remember when I first joined Dinner TV, I was trying to be like, I don't know, Dan Rather, like, welcome to Dinner TV. And the guy's like, whoa, what are you doing? If we wanted that guy, we would have hired that guy. He's like, just be yourself and be fun. And I try to do that. And I think, but you're always watching. Like Ray Ferraro is elite.
Yeah.
But he's very intense, very on point, prepared. Craig Simpson, same thing, very prepared, very on point. So everyone has their thing, and we don't all have to be the same to be great or really good at what you do, but you have to have your thing that works for you.
Well, one of the things that's tough is being yourself on radio and on television. I've been 30 plus years in the biz, and it's to kind of pull that wall down to let people see you a little bit. Ryan was on with us a few weeks ago, and Mr. Rashog said the one thing about this podcast is that it sounds like we're just having a coffee and Bailey's and shooting the shit, which is exactly the way we want it to be. But that takes work. And, the guys who like to work hard at it are the ones who get better and better. And you're certainly finding yourself getting better and better every time. The other thing that surprised me about you, and then we'll talk a little bit about your playing career and what's going on around the NHL these days, but I saw you at a Toast of the Town event, and you were speaking, and you just blew me away. I went, wow, I didn't see that coming. So from a public speaking standpoint, it's the number one fear on the planet, speaking in front of people. You clearly don't have a problem with that.
Well, I do get nervous. I'm not going to lie, especially something like that. The Toast of Town, there's some big hitters in that room, people that I really respect. And you don't want to fall flat, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge. I remember I did a couple of years ago, it was a comedy event with all the local like radio and TV personalities. Yep. And I was so nervous. I was sweating. I think I had a couple drinks before I hit the floor. Like and not that I was buckled out of my mind, but I just, you want to do well. Right. And I'm competitive, you want to do well and you want to give some shots. And so, I've been roasted now. I've roasted a couple people, and the Toast of the Town, it's a lot of fun, but the prep that goes into that, like I like to ride my bike. So I'll go for a bike ride and I'll think of like whatever, Robin Brownlee. Okay. What do I think of Brownlee? And I'm trying to like get little things. And I don't want to hit the obvious, like I try to come a little bit to the side or the back. So people are surprised, and it's hard, but it was a lot of fun.
Before we get on to hockey, I mentioned this to Bryn before we came on, and I know you've talked about it a lot of times, and it doesn't happen every time Bryn and I have guests on, but every once in a while they say something that really rings true in my head. You mentioned your kids more than once. My life changed so much when I became a father. My priorities changed. And when you mention your kids and being close to them, you and Shona, your wife, you've told your story, but not with us. You had to take real extra steps. You were at a point in your life where obviously the two of you said, we want to have a family. Well, it wasn't that easy. And tell people your story if you can, because I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, thanks, Brown. I love to share with people because I think that when we went through it, it's very difficult time, and we were very emotional. So we got married at 30 years old. I found a woman that was willing to take me on as a project, and so we got married. And right away, you think, hey, you're gonna, my wife wanted to have kids right away. We're 30. It turns out it wasn't that easy, and we had to do a few treatments. My wife did them when I was playing in New York, and it didn't work. And then, I come back to Edmonton, and it really made it it was a great move for a lot of reasons, but the biggest one being to adopt a child. It's good to have the same home or address for the whole year. If you're moving around, they're like, well, why? You live in the States, you live in Canada, what are you doing? They don't care if you play hockey. They're worried about the welfare of the child. So we got onto a situation with the Oilers where friends were getting pregnant, and we had a great life. My wife had a successful business. I was playing the NHL, and we were very happy, except for this one part. And I remember my wife would be crying herself to sleep at night. It was very difficult. So we decided to get it on my last year at the Oilers. We got it on an adoption list at the same time as we used a treatment for my wife to get pregnant at Christmas time. And I'll never forget it. It was, we were so happy. It happened before, but this one seemed different. It seemed like this little embryo would be a fighter. So I think it was just around Christmas. My wife and I decided we'd tell everyone after those mandatory 3 months or whatever. And so I came in the dressing room. I got really emotional and told all the guys what had happened, and they were all excited. I put money on the board. A very emotional moment. And I don't remember if we won the game or not. I probably even played very well. By that last year, I was a pretty shitty player, but it was a great moment. And then, you fast forward now to the trade deadline, and there was some talk that I might get moved, and I'm not sure why, but I remember thinking to myself, because we're on this adoption list, if I do in fact get traded, and the chance was remote, but if it did happen, I would have said, I can't go. And I would just said, this is why, I can't go because, I'm at the end of my road anyways. And I got to be here for my wife and this adoption situation. So, the year ended, I didn't get traded. And then the year ended, and 1 week after our last game in the NHL, we got a phone call, and a baby was born, and the birth mother chose us. So we went down, and we were able to get our son, and my wife was still 4 or 5 months pregnant this time. And boom, there's our little boy. And it was amazing. And so we had my son in April, then my daughter came in August. And then they said that, I remember we were walking out after we had my daughter, and our doctor's like, no, do you guys want some protection? Or like, protection? Like, are you kidding me? We've been trying to have kids for 5 years and you're offering it now. And she's like, well, sometimes things change. I'm like, hey, I know. Don't worry. Like, I know everything. Right. And so, 12 months later, boom, we're pregnant naturally. And we have this third child. So 3 kids in 22 months. Honestly, I always knew I'd be okay when I retired from hockey. It was a big part of my life, but it wasn't who I was. There was a lot of parts of me. But having 3 kids, the first 5 years are a blur. At Brownlee, I'd see you with Gregor, and I was just bagged. I didn't know what was going on. We weren't going out doing anything. But after about 5 years, things settled down. But so that's our story. And we've shared it with so many people, because when you go through it, you feel like you're alone. And people are like, well, why don't you just go get drunk? Oh, really? That's a good idea. I've never thought about that before. Why don't you go on a trip? Like, yeah, we've tried to relax. Yeah. All right. Like, and so it is amazing. And people, they do, suffer might be a bit of a dramatic, but people do really have a tough time with this. And so we've been very open and counseled many families who have had great success with their own families since then.
Great story. And thanks for sharing that. I want to start talking about a little bit about your hockey career, and then we'll move into what's happening in the NHL now. Okay. So who's your favorite player growing up? Is there one guy that was, I know you played back on the blue line. Was it a blue liner? Was it somebody else?
I liked Mark Messier was my favorite.
Oh, okay.
Bob Probert and probably Luke Richardson. Like I liked how those guys were very much, they did it their way, right? And they didn't get pushed around. And I'm not going to sit here and suggest I was as tough as any 3 of those guys, but I definitely like to hold my own ground and look after my teammates. And that was a big factor for me in the player I'd eventually become.
Did you ever have a chance to meet Bob before we lost him, or no?
Yeah, so I actually played with him. And I remember the first time I went in there to the dressing room, I was just a mess. I was so, I didn't want to fight him. I would if I had to, but I didn't really think that was a good choice for me. So
good, smart choice.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. I don't need to prove I'm tough by getting beat up by Bob Brover, but
yeah.
I went in and he was the nicest man, like bar down, the nicest guy, just calm and relaxed. But when he hit the ice, if something happened, he would snap. And, he unfortunately didn't play that year. And then I think they kind of sent him on a leave or something. But he was the most genuine human being and always, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Like, oh, you've got a girlfriend. Like I loved him. And I loved him before I met him. And oftentimes that's a bad recipe because you meet someone and you realize they're not maybe that nice, but he was as good or better than I expected.
It's interesting, Brennan. I don't know if I've told you this. I hadn't seen, Struds came to the Blazers. I was in Edmonton by the end of '89, so I predated him out of the loops covering those Hitchcock teams. But the first time I remember seeing him was preseason games. He was in Vancouver. And it was on back-to-back nights, and one was here and one was in Vancouver. I think I've mentioned it before, and he laughs because I think Struds was just playing hockey, looking to make the hockey club. But on back-to-back nights, the Oilers had a prospect, a first-round pick named Joe Hulbig.
Oh, yeah.
And on back-to-back nights, Hulbig got knocked senseless by Steve Staios and Jason Strudwick, and he was basically done then. I know he had a brief career, but for a first rounder, it was very brief. But I don't even know if you remember Struddy, but you KO'd him and Staios KO'd him, and I don't remember which, but he was literally doing the dead man swim on the ice. He was out flat like a starfish. Do you remember that?
I do remember. So it's a little bit of backstory there. So I didn't trade it to Vancouver the year before. Mike Keeney was the coach. So I that summer, it was very clear to me what I had to do to make the team, right, in training camp. And that was just be an absolute animal. So if I remember, I think I fought every game in preseason. I think I fought 6 times. And I do believe Joe Hulbig was on. And the reason I didn't like Joe Hulbig, and it was personal, is I remember when he was drafted by the Oilers, everyone talked about how he's coming out of college. He's this big physical guy. He's going to give everyone a beating. So I took it personally, like, hey, let's find out what he's got. I just came out of 2 years out of the Western League where it's like a Shark Tank.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I can handle this. So I went after this guy, and I looking back, you kind of feel bad, right? But I had to make a team. But the funniest thing I remember, I think it was the last preseason game in Edmonton, and I got into a fight, and I think it was my 6th fight in 6 games. I was done. So I think it was at the end of the period. So I go into the dressing room, and I'm sitting there icing down my hands and my face. Like, it looks like I've been just destroyed. And Todd Bertuzzi, who's a good friend, came in. He's like, enough. We know you want to make the team, but you are done. I'm telling the coach, you're not going out there anymore. Like, you fought, you've done everything you need to. It's a preseason. Do you not know that? I'm like, I got to make the team. So I'm just sitting there I'm like, okay, all right, you're right. And the trainer's like, okay, you're right. You better stop playing. 20 seconds later, in Mike Keeney's like, great, Pierre Struddy, you got another one in you? I'm like, you better believe it. I just jump off the table and I'm back out and I go, I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? And I did make the team, and it's a little different now. It's hard for players to do it, but at that time, that was a way of getting in. And I got in there, and it took me probably a month to recover from the exhibition games, but it was worth it, right? I mean, it worked out really well.
Hey, kind of going through your list of the places you played, the Islander thing, we weren't there long, but you played quite a while in Vancouver. You played with Chicago. You played with the Rangers, the Oilers. Of all those places, and that's quite a collection of places you played too. What do you remember about all of those? Are there specific things about specific cities you remember?
Well, I mean, Chicago, I would say it was a pretty dark time in that organization's history. And so I don't really have I love the city. I met my wife there. I made a lot of good friends, but I wouldn't say that was anything really special. Yeah. The Islanders, same thing. They were in a bad point of their career. And I didn't ask for a trade, but looking back, it was the best thing that happened to me. Going to Vancouver, though, was where I established myself as a guy that can play in the NHL. Mike Keenan was something, and Mark Messier was there, and Mark Crawford came in, and he was very hard on us and on me, but he was very good. He understood how I had to play, and he was very clear how I had to play, and I responded in kind, and he probably got me that made sure I could play in the NHL a long time. New York was amazing. I loved it there. It was after the lockout. Really, we were a bunch of just people that just kind of shot us away, like Yager and Raczynski, Kasparaitis, all these things. And Tom Ray, to his credit, brought us together, and we called, didn't hurt to we had Henrik Lundqvist, but he called us together. And, I really feel that year, our start, Lundqvist's first year, was the start of an unreal run for that organization. And we kind of set the blueprint, and then coming back to Edmonton, I never dreamt that I'd play for the Oilers. I grew up an Oilers fan. I grew up a fan of Kevin Lowe, Messier, Gretzky, all those guys. And now to count them amongst my friends and to play at home and to share that NHL experience with my family, my friends. I was always bringing people to the games, down into the green room after, meeting things, getting autographs. Like it was an amazing 3 years. And it was great because my wife and I were able to really establish ourselves in the city as community, not leaders, but just part of the community. And we were very proud to do so. It was, I was so lucky. I could have mapped out a better roadmap for my time in the NHL.
Glenn Sather once told me when I worked for the team, and that would have been in the late 90s, he said, you have to play 3 games in Edmonton. You have to play the hockey game, you have to play the media game, and you have to play the community game. And you can't slacken off on either the first 2 or the third one. He said, you've got to be able to get into the community, and you've done a great job with that. There are some organizations that you work for. You work for a lot of community people. Just tell everybody about how special that is for you.
Well, I mean, this is my hometown, so I want to make it better. I think that's, it's one thing when you come and play for a team, then you leave at the end of your career or whatever, but this is my hometown. So, for better or for worse, I have a bit of a platform and people are interested in what I say or do at times. So, I'm very happy to lend my name to whatever, and my time more than anything. I think people want your time. Like when we go to the Hockey Helps the Homeless or whatever tournament, the people playing there, they've done the work, they've raised the money, they've put the teams together, they've done all that. And so all they're asking from me is my time, and just have a good time, try to put a couple passes on the tape, maybe a couple beers if things go well. And that's really what they want from you, because they've done the work already. So that's the least you can do as someone who's asked. And I'm always honored when people ask, they actually say, we want you part of this. I can't believe it still, but you do it. And that's the gig. And, when I came here to the Oilers, I was very well established as a player and as a human. And I knew what I was about. And, and I remember when Brownlee, when I signed the first time, you interviewed me, I think it was you and Bob Stauffer, and you kept asking me about, have you looked around this division? There's a lot of fighters. I'm like, oh yeah. And I was so happy that was all you were focused on. Because if you start asking about, are you going to produce points? I'm like, oh, well, that's, what are you just talking about the fighting again?
Yeah, I hear you. It's interesting, Jason, and again, Brent and I were talking about this before you came on. I really enjoyed the time I spent with the Mustard Seed, helping them out with Hockey Helps the Homeless, dealing with the alumni, because frankly, there were a lot of the guys that I covered when I was on the beat. And I'm not here to embarrass you, but you were one of those guys that always struck me that even when the cameras were off, the approach was, I can help with this. If you need anything, just let me know. Some people, as long as it gets done, that's the important thing. But sometimes it's almost, I see the cameras over there. But when the camera's not there, you were always there to help, whether it was, I remember you wrapping presents at a event for the Mustard Seed. There was no skates. There was no alumni. There was no, hey, there's Jason Strudwick. He used to play. You were just wrapping presents, and you seemed fine doing that. Where does that come from?
Yeah. Well, my parents, obviously, my parents are, they're very giving people, and, they help out a lot of their neighbors, their community friends with that. But, and just my extended family, like, I think that, when you lend your name to something, I think it's important that you use your voice wherever you can to do things. But I think also, you have to be in there with everybody doing the work that's required. And I remember I've wrapped gifts a couple of times, probably not very well.
I was just going to ask if you're good at it, because most guys aren't. That's gift bag country.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, right. A lot of bows, a lot of tape. But you know what? I think it's important just to be there, and if you have the time to do it, like if I have the time to help, I will do it. Like it's not I'm too good or anything like that. And I think it's important to be in the trenches with whomever helping out and wrapping gifts. It's not or whatever the case may be. But I think that's part of it. You have to. You can't just be there for the high points. You also have to get in them in the trenches and help out.
We just survived another NHL trade deadline day. Okay, so you're an Edmonton guy. You played here. Oilers acquired defenseman Brett Kulak from the Montreal Canadiens. So now you're watching an Edmonton kid come back to play at home. He was talking about how emotional his dad was to hear he's going to be playing for the Oilers. If you're going to add any advice to, I'm sure the lots of advice that he's getting about playing in your hometown, what would the number one piece of advice be?
Well, you've got to set, and this is probably the wrong word, but a bit of boundaries.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of work you have to get done as a player. And my wife and I, right away, when we came back, I said there's going to be a flood of ticket requests and time requests, and we'll have to prioritize everything. Because and we didn't have kids. I think Kulak's going to have a child in the next few months or something. But you want to try to be as many places you can, but you're here to play hockey. So, I would try to say, so like, let's say Brownlee called, say, hey, can you come and do this? I'm like, I'm sorry. I've already got 1 or 2 events this week, and can we move it another day? So it's not saying no, it's just, we got to try to make it make sense. So I think that's the big thing, because the NHL schedule is relentless, and it's every other day, sometimes more than that. And you're tired and you're bagged, but there is a responsibility to put your time in. Because you're not only, because it's different when you're in your hometown, you're out visiting with your friends and family because they're living here.
Yeah.
As well as the requests that have come in from them to do, can you come to, Robin Brownlee's school? We want you to, whatever, bake cupcakes. And I'm like, I'd love to, but I've got a lot of stuff going on here, right? So you're trying to it's not the same. Like when I played in Chicago, I didn't have any family there. So someone wanted me to come over and whatever, come to their bar mitzvah and, do the worm for 20 minutes. I could do it. No problem. But it's a different level. So you really have to kind of, prioritize a little bit and not to sound too cool, but that's just the reality of the situation. And he sounds like a really smart guy. He's got, his family, I'm sure his wife's thrilled that he's coming back. So I'm excited to see what he can do and what he adds to this group.
What do you think he adds to the group? I was thinking a little bit about that. It's going to be fun. He also was playing with a very talented individual in Montreal too.
Yeah, he's a really good skater, and I've liked him for a while. I think he moves the puck well. I think one thing he's going to have to really figure out is, can he kill penalties? The way the group is set up now, I would say it's like kind of like a community. Everyone's going to do their own thing. So I see CC and Nurse lifting a lot of the heavy minutes. I see the 2 right shot, Bouchard and Barry, running the power play. And then Keith and Kulak are supporting those skilled right D-men, but they're going to have to kill penalties, because I don't think Bouchard or Barry are ideal for killing penalties right now. So Kulak hasn't killed a lot of penalties. Can he get on track? You can really, it's a bit of just understanding what the other team's trying to do, then being brave, standing in front of people that are shooting bombs at you, which I don't know if it's smart, but it's brave.
Struddy, just to keep it in Edmonton for now, Ken Holland said, because we know what people have been saying, you need a goaltender, we get a left shot D, maybe get a forward. This is a very intense fan base and opinionated. He said when he couldn't make a deal for a goaltender, I think our goaltending is good enough if we're healthy. If they're healthy, if Koskinen doesn't get ridden too hard and Smith is healthy. It's only been a couple of games, and that does not make the stretch drive. But last night I thought was a very good game for this club. And Koskinen and Smith have looked very good to me in their last couple of games. Did last night show you anything about what this team might be capable of if they can play that way down the stretch?
Well, first off, let's talk about what you said, that, maybe the fan base wants maybe another forward, a D, and a goalie. That is such a small shopping list. Let's go back 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Brown, you've been covering the team since Jesus walked on the planet. Other than the Stanley Cup times, the recent shopping list has been huge. And I think that adding a forward is probably debatable. That would be like a luxury item, right? That's like getting an appetizer when you're ordering steak and lobster. So I don't think that was really a need. The D, yes, it was a need in a goalie, but that shopping list is shrinking. And I think that Ken Holland came in, he said he's going to do, incremental improvements. And that's how I believe. And he said at the time, there's not one player that's going to fix this team, but it's just small improvements. So, I think he addressed that with Kulak. The forward, again, Brassard, I think it's a nice insurance policy. Yep. But the goaltending is an area that I think it's fair to wonder where they're at. So Mike Smith has had a tough year, really, really tough year with the injuries and all that. It's just been an absolute nightmare. And I've had years like that too. And you just never feel like yourself. And as a goalie, there's nowhere to hide. If I have a bad shift, hopefully the goalie bails me out or my partner. If you're a goalie and you're not feeling yourself, it takes a long time. It is hard. It is hard. There's no one's behind you. So I think that with these goaltenders, Mikko's been trending in the right direction. Mike Smith has a second good performance. And I would describe his game last night as very settled. Very settled. As a D-man, I always wanted to see the goalie behind me be calm, not all over the place, not suggesting he is, but just calm and efficient in his movements. I thought Mike was that last night. Now, part of that also, I think that's a reflection of what the goalies are seeing in front of them. Under Jay Woodcroft, it's been much better in front of them, much calmer. I think they're giving up less really big opportunities. And you play a team like Colorado, they're going to get chances. They're a good team. I mean, that's their job. They're paid to create chances. But Mike Smith came up big with some saves, that timely saves. And you lose 3-2 to a team like that. Missing your third line center. I know they are missing players, but I was really impressed and encouraged by what I saw last night, both from Smith and the team. And quite honestly, guys, that's probably the most playoff-like game we've seen by the Oilers, even counting the playoffs last year.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about the fact that I was kind of disappointed in their 5-on-5 play in the playoffs last year. The bottom 6 guys could not take any pressure off the top 6 guys. It just seems that this offensive core up front is far deeper and is starting to really round out nicely at just the right time. Do you see it the same way?
I do. But, as I watched the game last night, I'm looking at 2 guys, Fogle and Puljujarvi. Yeah. They've got to be physical. Yep. I thought Yamamoto and Kane had points. I honestly couldn't believe he didn't get called for some of the penalties he had. Some of those hits, I would call them borderline hits, but I mean, whatever. He's on the Oilers, so he can do whatever he wants. But Yamamoto and Kane, I thought had really good. I thought Draisaitl played with an edge. But you look at Puljujarvi and Fogle, they need more of that. Hyman, I don't know if he's exactly like that. I think Hyman is more annoying by how he's hard going to the net, hard on the back check. So maybe he's not like a Kane, and it's hard to be like Kane or Yamamoto. But Puljujarvi and Fogle, that's a conversation. If I was the coach, I'd pull them in and say, guys, we need you to hit. We need you to be physical because they're big bodies. They can skate. And if you have those 2 guys going, so the 2 guys I mentioned, Kane and Yamamoto, Fogle and Puljujarvi, you got Draisaitl playing a little bit edgy. Cassian doing, he does Archibald. He's like, now you're getting more than half of your lineup kind of playing that way. Because in the playoffs, you're going to look at Curtis McDermott last night, Manson. They were trying to abuse our forwards. Someone's got to push back.
Well, I think you're completely right. Because you know what, as neat as it is to see a guy like Yamamoto throw what little weight he does have around. Yeah. He's got to be sitting there thinking, he's never going to say it as a kid. Come on, guys. Like you're talking about the larger players on the roster. You can't have your most active body checker, the 5'8", 170-pound guy. It just doesn't work over the long term, right?
No, it doesn't. And I think that's a conversation. I'm not, I might take back my earlier statement. Maybe it's not a coaching conversation. Maybe that's a conversation from the captain and just say, guys, this is what we need. We need you guys to be big and strong. Like Fogle, he skates like the wind. He gets those areas, but crash into a guy, and a guy, not to leave him off. I think McLeod, he skates the same way, better probably than Fogle. And that's saying something. And he should be able to get some bangs in there. You need, because let's say the Oilers were going to start a 7-game series against Colorado. My 2 biggest guys I'm going after are Taves and Makar. Those are the two guys. You got to slow them down. And let's be honest, you're not going to slow them down game 1 or 2. You might not even get to them by game 3. But by game 4, they're constantly being knocked into, dragged to the ground. And, kind of some of that ugliness that you see in the playoffs, eventually it'll start to take its toll because they'll be doing it to Leon and Connor. You've got to go after those guys. And I'm not saying you don't have to worry about Mikko or McKinnon or any of those guys, but those two D-men are hugely important, and you've got to bring those guys down. And that's the guys I mentioned, that's 6 or 7 guys. That's almost one every line. One on every line should be able to get to those guys, and you grind them down like that. And I mean, maybe you got a chance in a 7-game series.
Well, I'm so old that I go back to watching games at the Coliseum with my dad in '84 when the Oilers were going for their first cup. And the radical change in thinking was, we don't keep the puck away from Dennis Potvin. We got to dump it into his corner and make him pay for it. So by the time game 2 and game 3 roll around, he's bagged. And let's talk about Colorado for a couple of seconds and the Calgary Flames, because right now they look like they're the top 2 teams in the West. Every time they watch, it is fun hockey to watch, just like the game was on Monday night between the Oilers and the Avalanche. But what are your thoughts on both of those 2 teams, Colorado and Calgary?
Well, I'll start the one we saw last night. I think Colorado is really well built. I mean, they are going to be a handful. And you add up Terry Lehtonen and whatever from Montreal, and Andrew Cogano, a really good Oiler actually for a long time. Manson, those are really nice additions. I know Cogano's not a big guy, but he plays big, plays fast. They're going to be a handful. They're going to be deep when they get Landeskog back, a very deep, heavy team. They're going to be a hard out. They're going to be really hard out, especially the mobility on that back end. And, they don't even have Bowen Byram in there, Sammy Girard. So they're going to be tough. But I think that team, you've got to be as patient as you can against them, but you're going to have to try to just manage their chances against. And like I said, take down those 2 D-men, and hopefully that softens them up enough because they've got a lot of depth up front. The Flames have, if not the best goalie, one of the best goalies, in the Western Conference. And that's a big challenge. And that'd be an interesting matchup for the Edmonton Oilers. Their D are, I think, similar to the Oilers. I don't think there's a real advantage one or the other. Up front, they're a deep team as well. You bring in Toffoli for that pick. But I mean, Tkachuk, the way he's playing, and obviously Johnny Gaudreau, all these guys, if they can ever get Monahan, instead of just paying $2 to public skate, maybe actually pays $10 for a hard skate. They might really have something there down the middle. So that would be, I think I'd feel pretty comfortable with the Oilers matchup with the Flames. The goaltending is a huge question mark though, the way Markstrom can play. But luckily they don't have to play Colorado to the third round if they were to go that far. But, let's say they play the Kings in the first round, they have to play against Dandino, Kopitar, and Doughty, and then their goalies. The Oilers should match up pretty well down the middle. You should feel pretty comfortable with that matchup. Then the wingers, I think they have the advantage. So, it's I don't feel there's anyone's going to dominate if they have the Oilers in their Pacific Division. But they have not more than a puncher's chance. They have a chance if they play continually the way they are now, 5-on-5.
Now, just a quick one, because I thought of you as a defenseman. We don't get to see a lot of Colorado, at least we haven't recently, and this was the first game with the Oilers. McKinnon is a stud, man. I mean, he is big, strong, fast, talented, and a little bit mean. I mean, is there anything else you need if you're a forward than what McKinnon brings to the table?
Yeah, McKinnon's interesting. I thought when he first came to the league, he was selfish. And I think that I was maybe wrong in my evaluation. I don't think he understood how to play with other players because he was always so far ahead of them. He's so fast and so fast. And I was like, well, why doesn't this guy ever make plays? Well, now he's starting to understand how to use his speed to the advantage of himself, but also his teammates. And I think that's the evolution of a great player, right? It doesn't you just don't walk into the NHL and be a perfect finished product. So he is a unique blend of all those things you mentioned. And I would hate to play against that guy because I could probably handle the physicality. I could, maybe I could stay in his way, but the speed, I couldn't handle it. So, you're playing against him. I think the big thing that you see the player or teams do against Oilers is you stay above him. So what does that mean? So that means if McKinnon is, swinging through the neutral zone on a regroup to get a puck back, you need your center between him and the net the whole way. You can't be on the offensive side of the puck because that just gives him time. So you don't want him to get that speed going. You got to slow him down. And then by doing that, the D-men feel a lot more comfortable to stand up. And now it limits the space again, because if the forward's not above McKinnon, and McKinnon swings, or the Demons like, oh boy, this is going to be embarrassing. So I back way off. And now he gets more time and space to get that speed going. And now you've got a raging bull coming at you 1,000 miles an hour. And by the way, you've got a huge fin. It's about 7 feet tall on the other side. And then Landeskog. Like, it's a complete nightmare. So I think defending him, Brownlee, starts outside your zone, in their zone, or, as close to the zone as possible.
Got to say, speed when you're a forward, man. Like Connor McDavid is a classic example of this. We had the Tampa Bay Lightning in town, and Victor Hedman was caught leaning just a little bit too much the wrong way, and you could almost hear from the press box him go, "Oh my God," because Connor was coming at him. It's got to be a horrifying thing.
And as a D-man, like, he's in his life, he's probably done, I don't know, 20,000 one-on-ones in between practice games and the outdoor rink. So, as a D-man, like, as soon as I saw him, like, he's done. And I wasn't a judgment saying, oh, I would have been better. You just can see that he doesn't have the speed required to deal with it. And it's a sick feeling because there's nothing you can do and you're on an island.
Yeah.
Brent, I don't want to forget this because I had to look quickly at the roster of Struddy's teams. We want to talk about McDavid and McKinnon. Got to ask a guy who played with them. The most exhilarating player I ever saw before Connor McDavid, not the best, just the most dynamic, was Pavel Bure. Mm-hmm. You saw him with your own eyeballs in Vancouver as a teammate. How good was he?
Yeah, he was amazing. So I get traded to Vancouver, right? I was with the Islanders. We played in Edmonton, and then we fly to Vancouver, and I get traded. Like, it's like within 10 minutes in the dressing room, I'm traded to Vancouver. I'm like, what the hell? So anyways, I change. I go and have a press conference, change hotels. So the next morning, I'm going in there. And there's Bure, McGill, Messier, all these, and some of my friends like McCabe and Bertuzzi, but whatever. So we go in there, and Mike Keating comes and says, we're not sure if you're playing today, but just practice and we'll see what happens. I'm like, okay, great. So I go, the first drill after the warm-up drill is a one-on-one in the morning skate. The first guy I go against, Pavel Bure, skates around me like I'm a pylon. I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. Next guy, Alexander McGillney, dekes me into the ground, scores. I'm like, oh, I think they're going to fire me. They're not even going to play me. So I skate into the corner, and a guy who was a really good coach. His name was Jack McElharty. We called him Jack McElharty. And he comes skates. So he's like, don't worry, son, or kid, you don't have to play against those guys. I'm like, thank God. And so that was my first intro into those two guys. And Bure was amazing. And I got traded for his best friend, Gino. So I don't know if he didn't like me or whatever. And I think he wanted out. So I don't take it personally. But, he was in great shape and he was so fast. But he was going for 50 goals that year. When I arrived in there, all the players said, pass to Pavel. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to try to pass to him no matter what. Like, I want to get points too. So he did score the 50 that year. But the explosiveness was amazing. And he was so quick. The only thing that was faster than that was how fast he'd get off of ice after practice into the tower and home, because the whistle, they'd still be resonating in the arena, and he'd already be off and out. It was, I don't think I spoke 10 words to that guy the whole time.
I'd like to think that you allowing him to go by you that quickly was a good thing for his confidence that year.
Yeah. He only had 47 goals at that point. So I'm like, buddy, you're going to need to score. You're going to have to go around and got it. But I'll never forget that morning skate. And, it was so humbling. And not that I was cocky, but you want to have a good first impression. And I get just turnstiled by these two Russian rockets. It's like, oh, God, this is awful. It never happened. Like, the only other time it happened that bad was in training camp. My last training camp to Oilers when Eberle came. And I remember thinking, I got to test this kid out. I got to see what he's all about. So we're doing a one-on-one drill, and I call him out. I'm like, Evie, you're going right now. So I go. I didn't even finish my pattern. He was by me. And I'm like, he's like, sorry, man. I'm like, don't worry about it. And I knew it was going to be a long year. I was done.
Hey, thanks for your time. We obviously have to tell everybody about your podcast, Got Your Back, with Ryan Rishaug from TSN, and also continued success in the afternoons with Jason Gregor on TSN 1260 in Edmonton. It's sounding great. You're having a lot of fun, and that's what it's all about, man.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, guys. It's a lot of fun to catch up with you guys.
In honor of our 99th episode of The Outsiders, of course, there will only be one great one. We all know that. But Brent and his team members over at the MacIntosh Group at RE/MAX RiverCity, pretty darn good, too. I'd say that's a bit of an understatement. Just like any good teammate, the realtors at the MacIntosh Group assist you in selling your home. What's the goal? Well, to sell your home for the most amount of money in the least amount of time with little to no stress at all. Gretz was no stranger to breaking and setting records, and the Edmonton single-family real estate market is breaking records here in 2022 already for not only values but units sold. It's important to hire a professional with the skills to work in this ever-changing market. I think we all know that. So if you're looking for a Hall of Fame experience when selling your home, then make sure you give Brent and the MacIntosh Group at RE/MAX RiverCity a call. Here's the number. Got a pen? 780-464-0075. Or you can find them online at macintoshgroup.ca. Both buyers and sellers, they can contact the MacIntosh Group at RE/MAX RiverCity directly. Once again, the phone number, 780-464-0075. And one last thing. Tell them the Outsider sent you. Well, that's it. Another episode in the can. That was a lot of fun today. Jason Strudwick, great guest, great stories, and he just gets better and better as a broadcaster every day. I love it. It's fantastic.
Well, I tell you, Brent, I love Jason told me something about a couple of situations that we brought up that I didn't know, and that part is always fun. I remember feeling sorry for, like I said, Joe Hulbig, and with what Struddy said and what he was trying to make the club. I didn't know that. And the other thing was the Bure thing. Right out of the blocks with your new team. Let's try and impress the new team. Those are the two guys you want to face right out of the blocks. I thought that was good.
You know, one of the things too, I've always kind of felt a little sad about the fact that Pavel Bure, because his career ended prematurely, that he's almost an afterthought when people talk about the greatest Russian ever to lace him up. Obviously, Alexander Ovechkin comes in, and Ovi should. Look what he's done. But I just don't think that Pavel Bure gets enough ink or enough chatter these days, and I find that a little sad. Alexander McGillney, also another talented guy, but man, oh man, having to go up against those two guys in your very first practice must have just been horrifying for him. So there's that. Hey, the NHL trade deadline has come and gone. This one was kind of a little, I don't know, it just seemed a little dull. But there were a couple of things that stood out for me. So we have Marc-Andre Fleury, one of the most notable ones, going to Minnesota. And now so you have Fleury and Cam Talbot, who posts a shutout the exact same day they get this goaltender in Marc-Andre Fleury. So the Wild are, we're talking about Colorado, and we talk about Calgary in the West, but Minnesota just seemed to be lurking in the weeds is the best way to word it, because they do have the potential to maybe surprise and upset somebody. So that's a pretty good acquisition by Bill Guerin, but there's some other ones that you noticed that are just as obvious.
Well, and yeah. And hey, you know what? We got to get Billy Guerin on again. He's making noise, and he's making some noise there in Minnesota. I'm enjoying that part of it. But yeah, it was quiet. I mean, numbers wise, I think, and it's funny because the networks now allow for so much time for these shows that half the time, most of the deals get made in the days leading up to it. So they kind of get stuck. But, I thought we've been talking about Colorado today, not the biggest deal, but Josh Manson is an awful good player.
Great pickup.
And he goes to that blue line. And the other one is, Florida. I mean, when you think of hockey in Florida, you think of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and for good reason. Yep. Over this last decade. The Florida Panthers look like they can make some noise. And I tell you what, Claude Giroux is a really good get, no matter how you slice it. He makes them a lot better right off the hop, too. I got to tell you, when I was programming at 1260 in Edmonton, I used to get that call frequently about our trade deadline day and how much we committed to it. And, you'd start talking to somebody who was phoning to bitch, whine, and complain about it. And I said, look, we're kind of an all sports station. If you're not spending, and hockey's number one, clearly. So if you're not spending the whole day talking about and building off of a trade deadline show where you can generate some revenue also, which is just as important as generating some audience numbers, it's a no-brainer. And
Yeah, it's tough to watch the TSN and the Sportsnet guys go for 8 hours where there might not be much to say, but they're all sports TV and radio stations. That's their bread and butter. That you got to do what you got to do, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's part of the business, and you just hope that there's enough compelling stories out there to fill the time. It's interesting. The one thing I've always found amusing, and maybe it's just an old newspaper guy thing, the will and desire on the day of the trade deadline,
right?
The second it's over, to declare winners and losers.
Yeah.
You don't know who won or lost. I mean, you can go by the book. It looks like so-and-so got what they needed or so-and-so didn't.
That's a nice pickup. That's another good line you can use.
Yeah. I laughed this morning, though, Bryn, when I looked, and it's not about the particular outlet because they're a big mainstream outlet, but it was on ESPN. And, of course, they listed by teams, but here's a new category for you. They listed Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl as losers because the Oilers, in their opinion, I guess, didn't do enough to bolster the lineup. So it wasn't just the Edmonton Oilers that were listed as losers. It was those two guys. I think that's taking it a bit far. It's
funny because, and this goes back to when I worked in Calgary at Sportsnet 960, The Fan, and I was hosting the Flames broadcasts. And I still remember this one particular night vividly, because the Toronto Maple Leafs were in town. And you know what it's like in any of these Western Canadian cities when the Leafs or the Habs come in, where it's 50-50. The general manager at the time of the Leafs was Brian Burke. Mm-hmm. And we were talking, I don't think it was on the air, but we were talking off the air about trade deadline days and trades and all that kind of stuff. And anytime Burke would lead with the word look, it's like you got to shut up and listen carefully because he's about to make a very strong point.
Yep.
He said that he says, I don't gauge trades with a stopwatch. I use a calendar. And it really resonated with me. The fans like to use the stopwatch. But for general managers, he says, you can't really tell if you've won or lost a trade immediately. You have to wait a little bit. And it makes perfect sense to me. And the comment that started with look, the comment has stuck with me so vividly through the years now. This is almost 10 years to the point now where that's exactly how I look at it. It's like people judging trades. The Oilers make a deal at 10:30 in the morning. The deadline's at 1. Guys are already assessing whether or not it's a disaster deal. We don't even know if it's a setup deal for another deal coming down. So I don't get too wound up about anything at 10:30 in the morning when I know the trade deadline is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just the nature of fans, right? I get it. But for me, I just sit there and go, wonder if there's more to the story here. Because having worked on the other side, behind the scenes in those offices on trade deadline days, I know that some days there's nothing going on until noon. And then all of a sudden it comes right at you. And conversely, there might have been something that was worked on 3 months ago, and it kind of went cold a month before the trade deadline. And suddenly a couple of teams make a couple of deals. And that deal you talked about way back in November is suddenly in vogue in the month of March. So it's an ever-changing landscape, but it's all part of the fun of the whole experience.
Let's and we didn't talk about this.
Yeah.
Let's have a little bit of fun before we go. In my opinion, my take is this. Regardless of what people wanted here in Edmonton, Ken Holland to do, and it's understandable, with the moves he made or didn't make, when I look at the Edmonton Oilers now, I see a team that, aside from Colorado and aside from Calgary, the way they're playing under Daryl Sutter,
yeah,
I don't see a team that has to take a back seat to anybody in the Western Conference. And I think the Edmonton Oilers, this is almost guaranteed to jinx them and have Mike Smith slip in the shower or Mikko Koskinen fall down the stairs. But with these two goaltenders, to echo what Ken Holland said on the deadline day in his media avail, I think if these two guys stay healthy, and with the addition of Evander Kane earlier, I think the Edmonton Oilers are going to pleasantly surprise some people. Does that get them past Calgary and Colorado the rest of the way? I don't think they catch them, and I don't know that they get by them when it comes time to play them. But I think this is a really good hockey club for the rest of the way.
Well,
what about you?
If you take a look at the Koskinen numbers over the last 15 games at the time of our taping this podcast, they're pretty solid. I think he's at a .920 save percent average. His win-loss record is pretty solid. The defense, I think, is a little bit better now than it was before the trade deadline. And the forwards are a little deeper with the Brassard addition. That also gives them some mobility in terms of what they want to do with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins as well. So this is probably the deepest I've seen their forward lineup in quite some time. I can't even remember where it was this deep. The question mark is going to be the defense, whether or not they can kind of eliminate those second and third opportunities, because really that's, if you take away, I remember talking to a former NHL netminder, and we talked about Mikko Koskinen, and everybody knows to go high to the glove side. But the former netminder told me it's up to the team defense to make sure that the shooters don't have 2 extra seconds to figure it out and to aim it. They just need to be blasting away. So there are some elements. They're better than they are. Can they upset and surprise? Sure they can. And do I think that Colorado and Calgary are beatable? Sure I do. But you got to have to do a lot of things right. The one thing the Colorado Avalanche did against the Edmonton Oilers on the Monday night game that we're talking about, the power play, their power play was deadly. You're probably not going to get anywhere near as many power play opportunities. We've seen that in the postseasons past. So special teams aren't going to be as big a big deal. The Oilers are better now 5-on-5 than they used to be. And so, yeah, could they upset? All boils down to 2006. You think of Dwayne Rollison stepping up and giving them unbelievable net minding, and that can carry you a long way. Same thing with Mika Kiprasov in 2004 with the Calgary Flames, was on fire that year, and they had good depth, and they were able to go a long way. So, yeah, I think they could do some damage, but a lot of things have to work out, Robin. A lot of ducks have to line up.
Well, I think they are. You know what? We talked at the start of the season, Brennan, a lot of people right across the league, no matter what city you're in, people here thought the Oilers could contend for the Pacific Division title. Now, well, I shouldn't say.
Well, take away a horrible span of injuries and that losing skid, they're there.
And most people, and they're not out of it yet, but most people thought it would be the Oilers and Vegas going at it for that top spot.
Yeah,
I think it becomes now the Oilers and the Flames. I don't think the Oilers are going to catch the Flames. They're 9 points back, but it doesn't matter. I think if Calgary and Edmonton are 1 and 2, it makes it really interesting because you've still got some other guys that are awful good in this. You look at the Central with Denver and Minnesota.
Don't forget St. Louis either.
No, I'm not forgetting them, but I'm seeing a step down from Colorado to the rest of them, even Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota, as of this recording, 78 points.
Yeah.
Nashville 78, St. Louis 77. Denver's got the margin there, and really in the Pacific, it's Calgary with the big margin. But Daryl's not going to let off the gas, you know that. So can the Kings stay there? Maybe. I don't want to sell them short, but the Oilers are right there at 75. Vegas has had its trouble. We know what's happened to them. So it's going to be interesting. And we've said this more than once during the life of this podcast, Brent. If it's good, I think it's good for hockey right across the board. If we have a Battle of Alberta that's an actual battle in competition more than just calling it the Battle of Alberta, because that's been laughable some years.
Yeah.
These two teams are stacking up pretty well. So when you look at the two different divisions, there's some pretty good hockey clubs on top right now.
I was trying to explain to the boys at home, a 26-year-old and a 15-year-old, that the Battle of Alberta you haven't experienced yet.
No.
And I was asked, well, why is that? I said, because when the two teams play in the playoffs and you lose, you can't sleep that night. You're irritated beyond belief the following day. You can't wait to get to the next game, but you're scared. And then if you win, the exhilaration that night, you can't sleep that night. And then you're on cloud 9 the whole next day as you get ready for the next game. It's really indescribable. And a lot of people have not gone through that and are about to perhaps go through that this season, in this postseason. I look forward to it. That would be great. It'd be a lot of fun. But not, if you know what I mean.
Well, and we know this, Bryn, because we're old as dirt.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes if you look through the record books, it doesn't tell you everything. There were many years where the Calgary Flames were probably the second best team in hockey.
They were.
They never got to the Stanley Cup final.
Winnipeg Jets were maybe the third best team and couldn't get by the top two teams, Edmonton and Calgary.
I was just going there. The Jets got a whole bunch of nothing at the end of the day.
And they were great. They had a great team.
They had unbelievable teams there. But if you go by the trophies, well, the engraver must have missed them. Well,
you guys were third. You guys were second. Yeah, but they were.
The Wild West was really wild then. And, things are different time, different decade, all that stuff. I get that. But man, it would be nice to see Calgary and Edmonton, from a selfish point of view, stay good. And then, we don't know who's going to come out of the East, but, we've got some noise down in Florida, and not all of it's coming out of Tampa for once.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to the stretch, because you know what? Coulda, woulda, and shoulda doesn't matter now. The trade deadline has come and gone. The teams are the teams. So let's see how it shapes up. I'm looking forward to this stretch drive.
Perfect spot to end this baby. Hey, check us out on Twitter. Our handle's really simple. It is @Outsiders2020. Keeps growing. It's also a great way to get a hold of us. Just drop us a direct message. We'd love to hear from you. Also, tell your friends and subscribers to check out our RSS feed on any of your favorite ear candy sites like Apple, Google, Spotify, Pocket Casts, etc., etc. And we're also on YouTube. You retweeting that, by the way, also helps push us to the next level. Just make sure you tell your buds that we're out here. And it's getting competitive. There's a lot of great sports podcasts out there, but I love the fact that we all seem to be listening to everybody else's podcast and we're supporting it. And I think that that's fantastic. I record at the Road 55 studio in downtown Edmonton. I'm a hockey puck throw away from Rogers Place. Robin is at the Lucky Sam studio. That's what we're going with, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, I finally typed it in. So Lucky Sam Studio in Southwest Edmonton. As I said, your support is greatly appreciated. Coming up in the next few weeks, Bob McKenzie, check. Going to talk to Cassie Campbell, because women's hockey, they're starting to finally get some positive and some good news. There's some interesting developments. We'll talk to Cassie about that. Lots of other guests coming our way. And, of course, we're going to get ready for the playoff run. I'm going to try to get Ron McLean on, actually. I chatted with Ron last August and said, as we get close to the playoffs, I want to get you on. Yeah, sure. So we're going to try to get him on as well. And we'll see if we can get a Flames and an Oilers general manager to join us here over the next few months. That one's going to be, it's a little tougher, but it's getting easier all the time because of the support of everybody and the fact that the podcast keeps growing. Robin, that's it for today.
Outstanding.
All right. Talk to you next week, everybody.
Bye-bye, boys. Have fun storming the castle.
Road 55.